Hello to all of you, and I'm sort of excited to present to you, and thank you very much to ASHRM for inviting me. I've put my taxi back 3 times. My flight leaves the airport fairly soon. I'm going to be talking to you how to perform under pressure, so I'm going to have to practice what I preach as I teach you. We live in very exciting times, as many of you know. You may have seen a graph like this. This is the pace of change that's happening. A lot of people talk about change. The pace of change that's happening right now is fundamentally different than the pace of change that's ever happened in the history of mankind. Normally, in this sort of exponential curve of change, if you're a mathematician and you log an exponential curve, you get a straight line. But if you log the change curve we're going through right now, you still get an exponential curve. So this means the exponential change that the world is going through right now is itself exponential. This has never happened. So we are here. It's a very exciting time to be alive as a human being, perhaps the most exciting time in human history, because the nature of change is so fast and so rapid, and you see it here in Dubai, that everything that we know and understand is changing very quickly. In 1945, something called the knowledge doubling rate, knowledge was doubling every 25 years. Now knowledge is doubling every 13 months. IBM calculate it will reduce to 12 hours. So everything mankind knows is changing roughly every year. So if your company is currently behind, within 3 years you can be ahead. If your company is currently ahead, within 3 years somebody else can overtake you. So it's, as Ray Kurzweil from Google says, it's a rupture in the fabric of human history. So this is kind of exciting to be alive. I want to draw one distinction and then focus in on something very specific about how is it possible to be brilliant every day. A distinction I want to draw for you, which we bring to light with most of the leaders around the world. What goes on when people come to conferences like this and hear speakers? Hopefully we go away and we have learned something. This is a horizontal phenomena. So we maybe go to conferences or we get sent to business schools and we acquire skills, knowledge and experience. So today you might, and yesterday you may acquire some knowledge. So that's a good thing. It's a horizontal thing. In this accelerating pace of change, it won't be enough. The true competitive advantage into the future, and the Center for Creative Leadership in America says, in fact, this is the #1 leadership trend for the next 10 years, is something called vertical development. So vertical development increases your altitude. This is the difference between adding more apps and upgrading the operating system. So how do you upgrade the human operating system? As we've heard from many speakers already, a lot of the challenges come down to the people. So in HR, it's about the people. And we're not going to keep pace with the change if we just keep trying to add more knowledge to the people. This won't be enough. We have to change the human beings fundamentally. It's not what they know, it's the way that they know it that matters. This is a vertical development, the upgrade of the human system. So that's what I'm going to dig into a little bit today. And show you something that is relevant to you. So regardless of nationality or culture or gender or any of those things, I'm going to share with you a little bit of neuroscience from my background that is true regardless of gender, race, culture, ethnicity, or so on. Something that's true for all of us about how the human system really works and what determines your ability to be brilliant every single day. So there's no doubt many leaders, one of the reasons they become leaders is they've got a certain ability, a certain talent. So in our experience over the last 20 years working with leaders, it's possible for leaders to be brilliant, but can they be brilliant every single day? So I'm going to share with you some secrets that underpin your ability to do that regardless of circumstance. So most organizations, whether they're sporting organizations, corporate organizations, are focused on improving the results. So whatever we're doing, we're trying to improve the results in some way. And most of you will have already realized that in order to improve the results, you've got to change behavior. If you don't change the behavior, you don't change the result. But even if you could change behavior, or you tell people what it is you want them to do, that doesn't necessarily produce a sustainable change in the result. So as a manager or a leader, you can go to your employees and say, I want you to do this and this and this and this. And then sometimes they'll do it, and they maybe do it while you're watching them. But when your back is turned or you leave the office, often something else happens. So it's necessary to change behavior, but it's not the only thing that you need to pay attention to if you want to be brilliant every single day. The reason people focus on behavior is because it's obvious. You can observe it. You can see whether people are doing or not doing what you've asked them. But whether that happens when you're not there is a whole different question. It's a bit more complicated. So we became very interested in what's really determining whether people do or don't do the right thing, whether they make or don't make the right choice in whatever it is they're doing. What's beneath the surface? So beneath the surface, what actually drives human behavior is how human beings think. So if you really want to change what people do, you actually have to change the way that they think about anything. Now, that's a little bit more complicated because you can't see how people think. You have to talk to them. Right? But even if you could change the way that people thought about their job, the customers, their life, it's still not enough, because the way that human beings think is ultimately determined by something more fundamental in the system, and that is how we feel. There is a reciprocal relationship between thinking and feeling. How you think affects how you feel, and how you feel affects how you think. But in this interplay between thinking and feeling, the real driving force, the active ingredient, if you will, is feeling. That's what you really need to change. And I could give you 2 hours of neuroscience, but I'm going to the airport, we haven't got time, about why that is, okay? But actually it's the feeling that you really, and any marketeer will tell you that. If you can change how people feel, you will often change how they think, which will change the choices that they make, which will change the result. So you've really got to get to grips with the feeling. But even if you've got to grips with the feeling, it's still not enough. There's something even more fundamentally in all of our systems that's determining how we feel, and that is emotion. Now, as a scientist, we draw an important distinction between feeling and emotions. They are not the same thing. Now, I realize that may be a surprise. In fact, it's a surprise to many of my scientific colleagues. In fact, making a distinction between feeling and thinking, I may have lost some of you there. Right? So it's very difficult for many people, particularly men, to distinguish feeling and thinking. Right? The women know this, so when I tell a room this, that thoughts and feelings are not the same thing, all the women nod and go, I know, that's true, and all the men go, what? But thoughts and feelings are not the same thing. Feelings and emotions are not the same thing. So if you really want to be brilliant every day, you actually have to get to grips with the raw emotion that underpin the feelings. I'll explain that a bit more in a moment, but even if you did, still not enough. There's something even more fundamental that determines the result on a daily basis, and that is your physiology. So the reason we get variance in performance on a day-to-day basis is there are multiple levels in the human system we simply haven't got a grip of. Now, what's physiology? Physiology is simply streams of data. As I'm talking to you now, a number of you will be getting some streams of data from your biological systems, from your stomach perhaps. Some of you may have had a coffee or a croissant or a drink of water at the break. There will be a signal coming from your stomach right now telling your brain, I've got a croissant, there's a croissant in there. And it's a signal that's telling your brain what's happening. That's a bit of physiology. And that signal comes up the nerve channels as a piece of electrical information. As your stomach contracts on your coffee, it creates a pressure wave. That's another bit of data, another bit of information. So physiology is just streams of data, if you will, that come from your stomach, that come from your heart, that come from your lungs, from your muscles, from your joints, from your liver, from your kidneys, from your spleen. All of these bodily systems are generating all of these different signals. These signals are electrical signals, electromagnetic signals, chemical waves, pressure waves, sound waves, heat waves, light waves. If you take all of that energy, all of that electrical energy, electromagnetic energy, chemical energy, pressure energy, if you take all of that energy from every single bodily system, that's what an emotion is. It's simply energy in motion. emotion. Energy in motion. That's all an emotion is. Energy in motion. And now you know that, you know more than most physicians and most scientists. Because the scientific community is frankly confused on this point. In fact, if you ask your doctor what an emotion is, he'll give you a definition that sounds like a feeling. Right? It's just biological energy. It's a composite biological signal, energy in motion. So what is a feeling? A feeling is the awareness in our mind of the energy in motion. So every single second of every single day, we all have emotions, even us men. Scary thought, right? Every single second of every single day, we have an emotion. But we don't all have feelings. Feelings would be the awareness of the energy in our mind. So if you're not aware of that energy, then that energy can be bubbling away without you feeling it. And if it's bubbling away without you feeling it, it can alter your thinking. It can alter two things in your thinking. It alters the quality of your thinking and the content of your thinking. So your biology will alter what you think and how well you think it. So if I come up to you in the front row, and I come over to you and I kick you in the shin, right? A biological signal comes up and informs your brain about what's going on. So that biological data will change the thought. So if I come up and I kick you in the shin, a different thought arises than if I come up to you and rub your inner thigh. A totally different thought emerges, right? Based on different biology. So the very thought that emerges is altered by the type of signal that's coming into your brain. You'll think a different thought if I kick you than if I stroke you. A different thought emerges. So we like to think we're clever. We like to think we're in charge of our own thinking, but we're really not. An awful lot of what happens in our consciousness, in our mind, is determined unconsciously by the biological signals that get triggered in us. So if you want to get control and be brilliant every single day, you have to understand the interaction between every single level of the system. So it's a little bit complicated, but the good news is, in all of this complexity, in complex systems, if you know where to start, you can make real changes and you can make real progress. So where do we start? In all the complex signals that the body generates, well, the good news is some signals are more important than others, as it is with all complex systems. One of the signals that really matters most is the electrical signal that the heart generates. So if you watch a medical program, this is what we call the machine that goes ping. Each heartbeat is a spike of electricity, a ping, 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 ping. So when your heart contracts, you get a spike of electricity. So you can measure the distance between one spike and the next spike, and based on the distance between two heartbeats, you can calculate your heart rate. And what you can see from this data is the heart rate is changing every single beat. This is something called heart rate variability. Now, this is very important in business, okay? Your heart rate is changing constantly, every single beat. So if I record any of you right now, you will see your heart rate's bobbling up and down, and if I take your pulse and I take the average heart rate is 85 beats per minute. But when you take an average of this data, you basically lose all the critical information. That's like listening to a piece of music and saying the average of Mozart is da. We don't even know it was Mozart. It could have been anything, right? So when you average data, you lose the critical information. And it's the variability, it's the fluctuations up and down that matter. And they matter in business for three reasons. The first reason is if I measure you for 24 hours, I can tell you when you're going to die. So now I have your attention. Quite important for succession planning, this one. So when we work with leaders, we'll often measure their variability over 24 hours, and you can give them a sense of their risk. So we've known in the medical community that a loss of variability, if you've got this much variability in your heart rate and it decays and you've now only got this much variability, you're at risk. And we've known that that predicts infant mortality in labour since 1965. In 1975, it wasn't just infants, it was adults who'd had heart attacks. A loss of variability predicted whether the person got off the hospital ward or never made it home. If they lost variability, they never made it home. In 1995, we took the general population and looked at the variability table by table. And we could tell that those who had very little variability were much more at risk of something called all-cause mortality, or death from anything, including accidents. That's interesting, isn't it? Including accidents. You could predict the likelihood that somebody would die from an accident based on their loss of variability. I'll explain why that was the case in a moment. But it predicts your risk, not only of death, but illness. Right? So quite important. Now, we've been teaching organizations for 20 years about this. Nobody's interested. Right? Somebody falls over, they just get somebody else in. That's the brutality of it. Okay? So forget reason number one. Reason number two you need to know about your variability is it underpins your ability to turn up and respond to commercial threats. It underpins your dynamism. You need, as a leader, to have lots of energy. And you've got to pour energy into the system and somehow recover that energy, and the next day you've got to pour energy in again. And you've got to do that day after day after day, week after week, month after month, quarter after quarter, year after year. You've got an enormous amount of energy required of you to keep showing up and driving the system forward. Right? Now, if I quantify your variability, I can tell you exactly how much energy you actually have. Not how much you think you have, how much have you actually got. And it will underpin, so you'll see some people who have lots of variability, lots of energy, lots of dynamism, able to respond and adapt to any changing market circumstance, and then you'll see other leaders that have very little. And you'll see a big difference across the workforce. But perhaps the most interesting reason that you need to know about heart rate variability is it underpins your ability to think clearly. Now, all competitive advantage ultimately relies on you being smarter than your competition, you being able to think more clearly, be more insightful, be more innovative, be more disruptive than anybody else. Now, the variability will determine that. And the reason it will determine that, and I'm going to show this and prove it to you live this morning before I leave. Okay? The reason it does that, as I'm talking to you right now, your heart rate is fluctuating up and down as you're sat in your chair. Okay? And it either looks like this sort of chaotic fluctuation or what we call a coherent fluctuation. Okay? There's two types of patterns. So this isn't to do with the amount of variability, this is to do with the pattern of variability. It's either chaotic or it's coherent. Now, what happens when you're in a state of chaos, when you're putting a chaotic signal from the heart up the vagus nerve into the brain, the consequence of that signal is it shuts off your frontal lobes and you have what we call a do-it-yourself lobotomy. So under pressure, you basically lobotomize yourself. It's as though you've suddenly taken the stupid pills. So you can be in a meeting or an interview with a journalist or a difficult, threatening situation, or the customer suddenly looks like he's not going to buy from you, or your colleague is giving you some negative feedback. Once your biology goes into chaos, your frontal lobes shut down and you talk nonsense. Blah, 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 blah. And what's worse, you often don't realize you're talking nonsense because your brain's shut down. You think you're performing well, and you're not. And you don't even realize it. So all human beings are at the mercy of brain shutdown under pressure. Right? 200,000 years ago, this mechanism saved your life. So 200,000 years ago, when we were wandering around, in the sort of survival mode, we developed this mechanism that when we ever saw a threat, the biology goes into chaos and it creates binary thinking in our mind. Fight, flight, or play dead. Those are the only two choices you need in the face of that sort of threat. But here we are, 200,000 years later, and we still have the same biological mechanism. And it's getting in the way at work. Right? So we're not in the same type of threat, but the biology is the same. So basically, the human system is running with 200,000-year-old software, and we've never had an upgrade. we've got this old software, so when you put somebody under threat, the brain just shuts down. And I thought I'd show it to you live right here, right now. And in order to do that, we need a willing volunteer to come up to the stage, and I'm just going to wire them up by just putting this clip on the ear. Now, I hear that somebody called Abdul Hadi, who is a willing volunteer. Is that right? Well, we're going to show you what happens live. Now, I've co-opted him, really, so he's very generous. He didn't know I was going to do that. So he's very generously agreeing under the pressure. So we're going to see how Abdul performs. Can I get you to come and sit here, please? So we're going to just put this clip on your earlobe. If you sit here. Are you ready?
That. Just leave it there. That's fine.
Just hold that. You got that? So what we're going to do, if I can just get out of the PowerPoint presentation, is first of all, we've got to confirm whether you are alive or not. Okay? That's good news. His heart's beating, ladies and gentlemen. He is actually alive. He's not a robot. Okay? So what's happening is every time Abdul's heart contracts, it squirts blood into his ears, and his ears go red. Okay? You can't see that. Where is the thing? Let's see if we can extend. You can't. I can see it, but you can't. Okay. We need tech support here on this. We're on. Duplicate. Okay, there we go. There we go. Good news. You are alive, and they know you're alive because they can see your data. So every time his heart contracts, blood goes into his ears, and his ears go red. Between contractions, all the blood drains out, and his ears go white, and then they go red, and they go white. So we can see this red-white at the bottom trace here. There's red, there's white, there's red, there's white. So that's his heart beating. Can you feel your heart beating? It's going boom, 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 boom. You can feel that? Okay, good. So when his heart's beating about 80 beats per minute, and you can see it's fluctuating up and down. And in a moment, I'm going to do something very stressful, and we're going to see how well you cope under the pressure with everybody watching. Are you okay with that? Yes. Oh, no problem. That's no problem at all. And his heart rate's already going off. We haven't done anything yet, but already he's getting a little bit nervous. The heart rate's fluctuating up and down. And all I'm doing is talking to him. So his heart rate was sort of bobbling along there about 80. Now it's up to 100. Now you can't tell just by looking at him on the surface. The behavior looks okay. But on the inside, is what's happening, right? You'd never notice beneath the clothes, okay? So this is how sensitive human physiology is to the tiniest of threats. We introduce a little bit of threat, and you can see the signals vacillating up and down very wildly now. Can you see that on the television over there? Oh, you can see it in the front of you, yeah. Okay, so he's desperately trying to control himself now. He's sending himself cognitive messages. Calm down, you fool. People are watching, right? And he's desperately trying to look good in front of you all, right? And we've spotted he's doing that, and his heart rate's gone off again. So at the moment, I just introduce a little bit of stress, and off his heart rate goes. So no matter how well controlled he thinks he is, actually the person that's really controlling him right now, that would be me. So I'm pulling his strings, whether he wants me to or not, okay? So what I want to show you is that when we actually give him something stressful to do, let's see how well his brain works. So I'm going to get you to do some mathematics. Are you good at mathematics? No. Okay. So we're going to get you to count out chemistry. Well, we're doing mathematics. So counting out loud, we're off, you see, we're off again. Counting out loud backwards, subtracting threes. Okay? So I'm going to give you a number, and I want you to take away 3 and tell me what the answer is. Then take away another 3 and tell me what the next answer is. Take away another 3 and just keep going and going and going. Okay? Are you ready?
Let me see. Muhammad, are you ready? Huh?
He's desperately hoping somebody's going to hold up answers to him out in the audience. Now, you're going to have to do this on your own, okay? So counting out loud backwards, subtracting 3s without making any mistakes, right? Can you see this? We haven't done anything yet. The chaos that's going through. Somebody help me, help me. Somebody give me some. You see, the tiniest of threats, and all I'm really doing is talking to him, right? I'm introducing the possibility of a threat, and already the panic that's going through his system, which you cannot see from his behavior. Right? So you can imagine if the biology is in this much chaos, it's going to be very difficult for your brain to function. Right? Now, when you're sat opposite a customer or somebody else, if that biology is in chaos, the performance will be impaired no matter how clever that person really is. And until you've got control of this, anybody can shut down your performance like that at a moment's notice. So I was giving him a moment to recover a little bit. So let's see how well he does and how well his brain functions when we get him to do the mathematics. So counting out loud backwards, subtracting threes without making a mistake. Are you ready for this? Yeah. Okay. So as fast as you can, without making a mistake, starting off at 300. Go, come on, 300. Come on. 227,
297,
297, 200.
Oh, so we do it quickly, huh?
Yeah, quickly would be good. Okay, give him a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. What a... Okay, thank you very much indeed. So he's keen to... I was going to teach him how to stop that happening, but he's already quit. So let's just have a little look at his data. Okay. So what we saw, basically, let's zoom in here, is what you witnessed there is that when you put somebody under pressure like that, we only got one answer out of him, right? The first answer was incorrect, but I could have taken any one of you out of the room and the same thing happens, right? When you put pressure on somebody, the biology goes, and the first answer, 300 take away 3 is 277. No, it's 297. And basically you get this phenomenon. It's called cortical inhibition, so brain shutdown under pressure. Now this is the basic human problem. No matter how clever you are, no matter how many leadership programs you've been on, no matter how much training that you've got, how much experience, how much knowledge, you can all get shut down by your own biology. So until you learn to get control of that biology, you're at risk of poor performance. So the start point is you've got to build back your own biology. Now, the first thing to do to get that biology under control is to learn to control your breathing. So had Abdul stayed up here, I would have showed him how to do that, and you would have seen him generate some lovely coherence, right? But there are 12 different parameters in your breathing that you can change. You can change speed, volume, rhythmicity, location of breath, and so on and so forth. The number one important factor is to control the rhythm of your breath. So it's not deep breathing, it's rhythmic breathing. So when somebody says, oh, you're going to that meeting, well, before you go into the meeting, take a few deep breaths. Don't bother doing that, it doesn't help, right? That's irrelevant. But if you take a few rhythmic breaths, your biology starts to improve, okay? So rhythmic breathing will stabilize your physiology. So if you breathe rhythmically and evenly, the physiology starts to change, and we could have showed it to you instantaneously. So rather than this chaos, and this chaos causes the brain to be inhibited, right, you can generate some coherence through rhythmic breathing. Now, once you've stabilized your physiology, the next place to go is to start to stabilize your emotions and your feeling and get a grip of that. Now, most human beings cannot control either their physiology or their emotions, but it's entirely possible to control both. Once you've got control of both of those pieces, you can then get control of the quality and the content of your consciousness. You can get control of the thinking. Once you've got control over the thinking, you can get control over the behavior. Once you've got control over the behavior, you can get control of the results. So you build back your performance from the bottom up. So that's what I'd suggest to you, and you can assume that none of that is true. You don't even need to believe me, but tomorrow, do this experiment. Or next time you feel a little bit under pressure, just control your breathing. Just start to breathe in a rhythmic fashion and see what happens to your brain function. and see how you can start to become brilliant every single day by controlling your biology, then controlling your emotions, then controlling your consciousness, then controlling the behavior, and then controlling the results. And if you put all this together, you truly can be brilliant every single day. Thank you very much for listening. She's scared to ask me anything now.
Please don't let me sit here. So thank you. We have got only one question for you because you have a plane to catch. We've seen how Mr. Abdul Hadi's heart works. But what do you think from your experience, or how do you think the CEOs and leaders in the Middle East differ from the Western counterparts in terms of what they think about today?
Well, we did some research where we went and interviewed CEOs all around the world in every geography, and nearly all CEOs think predominantly about the commercial performance of their business. And it's not enough. There are actually 4 things that you really, to be brilliant in leadership, you need to, of course, think about the results and the commercial performance, but you also need to plan for the future. So vision, ambition, purpose, strategy, governance. These are the pieces of the future. You have to have it really clear. Most companies are confused about these things. So even if you've got both of those things right, then there's all the culture piece, right? And how well teams function. And so what we've heard over the last 2 days is an awful lot of information about the things that we need to do to make our business function. So there's a whole dimension of doing. What is it that we need to do? In addition to all of that doing, what about the interpersonal dimension? It's culture. It's the stuff, the glue that binds people together. You need to pay attention to that too. But the piece we've been talking about this morning is what about what happens inside of us? That's the I dimension. So there are these 3 dimensions: I, we, and it. So those are 3 dimensions, and the best leaders have a 4th dimension, which is how sophisticated is our operation on the it? How sophisticated are we on the culture, and how sophisticated am I as a human being? So if we can bring some altitude to I, we, and it, that's you as a 4-dimensional leader.
Great, thank you.